Yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this yet another webcast in the series we are calling as Future of Technology Skills in India. And today's discussion is focused on changing skill sets in Indian IT from full stack developers to new platforms. This webcast, as you would know, is brought to you in partnership with Pluralsight. And I am Megha from the People Matters team, and I will be your host for the day today. Well, I think most of you belong to IT industry and maybe seeing the skill set shifts that are happening. In fact, I was reading a recent report where it talked about how the new IT roles will now include jobs in cybersecurity, mobile app development, new user interfaces, data scientists, and platform engineering. And there's, of course, a lot more that's happening in this sector. And keeping in line with the global trends, what we've been seeing is that there's a growing demand for full stack developers. So what does that essentially mean for organizations and leaders and practitioners like yourself? It essentially means as to, how can you enable skills amongst experienced and fresh talent to develop them as full stack developers and really enable them to deliver the business expectations. And that is what brings us here today to this discussion. Today, the key pointers to cover in the discussion are what are the key skills required in Indian IT in today's context? Who is a full stack developer and how can you enable developers to be one? How can companies best enable latest in-demand skills for freshers and experienced professionals? And what are some of the best practices that all of us can learn from? So those probably are the four key buckets that we're going to look at our discussion today. And while this topic is really exciting, we have very experienced speakers with us to take us through this topic. And let me take this opportunity to introduce our speakers for the day today. We have the privilege of having with us Arjun Pratap, founder and CEO, Edge Networks, and Srinivas Vijayaraghavan, Country Head Marketing, Pluralsight India. I will just share a little brief about our speakers so that you're comfortable, when as a speaker speak and you have questions for them. So for Arjun, fueled by the vision to build future-focused HR technology solutions, Arjun leads Edge Networks to be an innovative artificial intelligence-driven HR technology solutions provider. Their focus and vision is to help organizations solve their toughest talent acquisition and workforce optimization challenges. Prior to Edge Networks, Arjun has worked with organizations such as Speed Era Networks and Akamai Technologies, where he was responsible for building their India and international businesses. Welcome, Arjun. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, so I think Arjun is on mute. So while Arjun unmutes himself, let me just take this opportunity to introduce Srini as well to you, our second speaker for the day. In a 16-year marketing career, Srini has run marketing for business units in top companies and for startup and mid-sized companies in e-learning, IT, telecom, and retail e-commerce. He has built corporate and product brands, managed products, built pipelines, created go-to marketing strategies, really the entire gamut of things that marketing involves. Srini has a hands-on experience for them in various forms of channel, be it online or offline. For those of you who may not know, Srini is also an author and has quite a thousands of words that he's authored so far. So welcome, Srini. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Arjun, I can see you back. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this discussion.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you so much, and apologize for being on mute.
No worries. Fantastic. So before I move ahead, I would also like to take a moment to thank our partner, Pluralsight, Anish and his entire team for bringing in their expertise and experience and really helping us putting this all together in the form of a conversation that's valuable to you all. Pluralsight is an enterprise technology learning platform that delivers a unified end-to-end learning experience for businesses across the globe. Through their subscription service, companies are empowered to move at the speed of technology, increasing proficiency, innovation, and efficiency. Founded in 2004 and trusted by Fortune 500 companies, Pluralsight provides members with on-demand access to a digital ecosystem of learning tools, including adaptive skill tests, directed learning paths, expert authored courses, interactive labs, and live mentoring. So thank you so much, the Purusite team. And well, now we have a very interesting topic at hand. We have some very experienced speakers with us. It's probably the time to start the conversation. But before that, let me very quickly just take the flow of the agenda for this conversation. And so how we're going to begin with is that we will request Arjun and Srini to share their thoughts on the topic we have at hand. And then I have a few questions prepared for them, which we will take up once they share their thoughts. And what I would request all of you is also, because I'm sure you will have a lot of questions flowing in during the conversation, is to use the comments box on the right side of the screen that you're viewing right now. So in the comments box, you can put questions throughout the discussion, and we have a dedicated time at the end of this discussion where we will start picking up your questions and try and see how many can be posed into our speakers and try and seek answers and thoughts on those questions from them. So keep the questions flowing in. You have the opportunity to keep them flowing in throughout the discussion. And without much further ado, I would now hand it over to Arjun to take us through this topic from his perspective. So over to you, Arjun.
Thank you, Megha. Just wanted to quickly sort of start this topic with sharing a PowerPoint presentation that we've made up for this session. So I'm going to just pull that up. If you can just bear with me on that. There you go. So yeah, I think this topic that you guys have sort of set the pace for is very interesting and close to heart, because we as the company are dealing in an industry that's evolving so dramatically, right? And the environment in India from an IT standpoint, obviously you have the massive movement of startup companies that are spawning because of a need, right? And the need is to drive more technology innovation out of the country. And then you see on one hand, the bellwethers of the IT industry sort of defining their paths going forward based on them having global customers. So there are two equations that you're going to be seeing. One is the large companies starting to talk digital, and the smaller companies, which is the startup ecosystem, being the fundamental path breakers in creating innovation or innovative models with Me Too technologies coming in and driving that sense of change. Now, going to the larger companies that are the dominant factors of defining technology within our ecosystem, right? So one hand, you have the Ubers of the world, you have the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Netflixes, who define technology across the world. And the fast pace of change is a fact that we see with the IT industry looking at a huge chunk of their business coming in from what they call digital. Right? And the digitization of their environments in terms of the services that they render to their current customer base has evolved so dramatically that their needs are being defined by new age skills. So you have things like UI, UX, design thinking, full stack developers, you have data scientists, you have a requirement for machine learning, and a well-brandished term called artificial intelligence, right? Now, I think one of the things that I have seen as a trend is the gap is widening in the industry, and akin to the healthcare industry, where you have demand and supply gap being phenomenally large across the board. The IT industry, because of the pace of evolution of skills that are required and the technologies that are running these platforms across the globe, you find the gap is widening, right? You find a lot of the companies that are the bellwethers of the ecosystem defining how much they require these skills by even reporting the number of staff that they have on the digital side of the business in their annual reports. You find that these trends are shifting dramatically because they are talking about how digital is going to be close to about 30-35% of their businesses by 2025. By 2020, they're talking about it dramatically shifting to about 25% of their business. So when you look at that, you're talking about $10 billion revenue businesses saying $2.5 billion is going to be delivered across a landscape that they can't today sort of fit into because of the lack of skills. So there's a widening gap, there's a huge demand, and you see that the redefinition of skills and the understanding of skills is also becoming very, very prominent. Now, what we see as we go forward is we see sort of as part of our go-to in terms of the workforce planning and analytics that we see across the employee workforces inside companies, as well as the skills that trend across the globe. We see a change in terms of the kind of uptrending skills, the stable skills, and the detrending skills. And you kind of see that there are skills that are sort of gaining momentum because of the kind of jobs that are coming in from, say, a data science standards. We see statistical modeling. We see skills that are reshaping the full stack that we talk about, right? I think this sort of trend is something that is very important to pay cognizance to, because we sort of have clear vision of everything that's happening from a change perspective. Now, I think that the modus operandi of looking at how you sort of redefine what is back end, what is front end, what a full stack developer itself is required to perform, is something that we believe is going to be the redefinition of the industry in many senses, right? So companies, like we talked about the bellwethers of the IT industry, their competency frameworks today have to support what a full stack developer will have as part of the stack. And the understanding of the stack is still being defined into that competency framework to be able to consume, to define so that you can hire. So think about it this way. Very simply, a full stack developer has a sort of server, hosting, relational, non-relational database experience, UI, UX experience, the ability to sort of think in a design thinking level, have integration capabilities, security and compliance understanding, ability to look at APIs and sort of integrate into different software. And it's really that jack of all trades that you're looking for, but in small quantums, right? You want the person to understand the back end. You want a person to understand DevOps. You want the person to understand front end. You want the person to understand a bit of design, right? Because the user experience also comes in, and their ability to sort of be customer facing in that end and understand the requirements, so they develop around that requirement, taking the entire gambit of the requirement from a holistic approach starts kicking in. So I think these things become very, very important for us to face through, to understand that there are four fundamental elements. Now, a lot of these companies don't have it in their landscape to appreciate the proficiency level that is required across a full stack. So think about it this way. You have levels of proficiency that are defined to a role that are legacy, but today the role itself is being, I think, in question of what the stack is. So then to determine the proficiency of the person is still far off. So to help these companies on that journey, what we have been able to sort of deliver constantly is the understanding of the stack, right? And I think the companies today are redefining their competency frameworks to fit in the stack so that they can cater to the new business that they're seeing. Now, how would you do that when you have 150,000 people, you have $10 billion of business, you have a digital demand that's close to 25% of your entire business volume, and you need to sort of fill that demand gap that is tremendous, and that pressure is constant. One of the things that you see is the reskill, upskill sort of trend becoming a reality. Because what you have is a base level set of technology professionals who have great skills developed in an industry that has been evolving with them, right? So you have methods to do this transformation within the business that become very, very relevant. And one of the channels that we have seen very clearly, apart from one having training programs in a bootcamp format, you have hackathons that allow people to sort of deliver code to a specific problem. You have the open source environments where people sort of feed off ecosystems that allow them to sort of learn from other people's journeys. And you have the online courses that provide you a value proposition because it's anytime, anywhere learning, right? A combination of all of this is definitely something that people want to leverage. Now, what we have seen as reskill, upskill trends, within businesses is talent transformation needs or career path needs that allow people to morph from where their bases are today, based on the kind of skills that they have, into full stack developers very quickly using mediums that I just defined. Right now, organizations, at large scale, at one point, are thinking about this anytime, anywhere learning, because the whole model of delivering to a client is also shifting, because the millennial also kicks in, right? The kind of people that we can hire today to deliver to a work product is also in the form of work that they would deliver to the company in, being contract, the gig economy. You find that people want to sort of do work piecemeal. They want to not align to a business on a permanent basis, and that sort of contract staffing model has a legacy to it in terms of the way industries, or specifically the IT industry, has looked at it. I think that change is because it's a global change. People have the ability to choose what they want to do. People have the ability to sort of change that choice every 6 months. So you're seeing durations of work morph in terms of what would you call a qualified, experienced employee, the tenure of the employee. All of that has changed. So how your relevance to hiring a person to do a job changes, because one is the person wants to work from where they are. They want to work on a specific problem, and they want to work in a specific time frame, right? Now, time frame is defined by the business requirement, but also defined by the person having these multiple other requirements. Now, it sort of fits the bill because your cost of overhead is tremendously lower. So to deliver to that, you have to also figure out how you can cater to the training that's required, the learning that's required. If it's an internal workforce that you want to redeploy, retrain, upskill for new requirements that are evolving every 6 months, or you want to hire someone from an open talent marketplace. Right now, the models that sort of have to support this is a lot of flexible training, and the training has to sort of relegate to how personalized it is, right? So if, for instance, a DevOps engineer wants to understand how to sort of shift to front-end development, how would they be able to do that based on the base level skills and the ability to sort of learn these skills in a time frame and in a manner that's consumable, right? So I think that is generally the trend that we're seeing in the IT industry today. We have a fair few customers that are sort of redefining the shape of their business. And I think one of the things that we're seeing very clearly is the mode of talent transformation has become a very key player or instrument in helping people move that to the next level. Now, as I sort of go through this understanding of where talent sort of sits today and the demand and supply gap, we as a startup face that constantly because we're delivering on data science models, machine learning models. We sort of are on the deep learning cusp at this point in time. To find qualified talent, obviously, you could go to named universities, you could go to niche training programs, you could pick up talent from, sort of the sort of usual suspect places, right? Go to recruitment consultants. But the point is, if you had the availability of people learning, consuming, and marketing themselves across a talent marketplace that's more accessible, right? One of the key instruments that defines that access to that talent to bridge this gap is the availability of training or learning that can be accessed anywhere, anytime. Now, if that sort of shifts with the pace of technology moving, I think that will allow the pace of change to be sustainable in countries like ours. We, I think, have a great opportunity, and I think with the entire 2016-17 being dedicated to AI and I think a lot of AI bashing also, we have seen that people are now learning to embrace the value of augmentation as it has been in the last 50 years. Whenever we have seen disruption coming in, we've also been able to face the disruption because of learning and awareness. And I think that transformation journey is very important for us, because we know that the facts face us that 1 in 2 jobs is going to be relegated to some sort of automation that's going to come to fore, right? Um, that's the writing on the wall. How ready are we? How clued in are we in terms of catering to new skills, new requirements, new models, competency frameworks that didn't exist before, because those skills never existed. You won't even know what the next new languages or the framework is, or the mode of architecture is, right? So I think that allows you to sort of figure out. I mean, I was just hearing someone saying that blockchain is going to be extinct now because you have the hash graph. Now, how many people know that, and what are they going to do about it? Because it's evolving so fast that you don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. The beauty of it is it's all going to deliver to a value as long as we can consume that value, and businesses and governments can sort of sustain that value. So I think in that path, one of the critical factors that people constantly fall back on is learning and awareness. The ability to say that what the requirement is, because you're aware of the technologies that sort of cater to the requirement, based on the fact that the condition today of the talented people that we have in this country is based on the learning that's provided to them on a constant basis. I think that is really where I stand. I've seen these companies sort of morph. I'm working with the banking sector and the IT sector, constantly sort of seeing technology requirements redefining how the business requirements are being made, and I think that's the future. I'm very, very happy that that future is technology based, because I'm a big fan. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Srini now to give us a lot of insight on what's next on the learning side that he sees.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you for those fantastic insights. I know that you're in a great position to see some of these changes as you partner with a lot of tech companies and help them in their talent transformation journeys. If you can just give me one or 2 seconds while I pull up my presentation. Uh, So complementing what Arjun said, I'm going to give you a perspective of the the operative word here is really the change. And I think Arjun spoke about the changes that he is seeing in the marketplace with customers, the way skills are trending up or trending down. Change is really the operative word in the Indian IT industry today, because we've sort of reached a sort of an inflection point as an industry. It is now a mature industry. It is no longer a new industry. It's about a 30, 40-year-old industry, which means that the time for changing skill sets, for the time for changing business models is here. And a lot of the waves are devoted to the focus that a lot of tech companies are putting into reskilling their workforce in order to cater to what their customers are wanting them to deliver in the new age. So as Pluralsight, we work with a lot of companies in figuring out how they can changes in technology and find a balance between also investing in current technologies to keep the lights on and to keep their businesses growing. So I'm going to touch upon 3 aspects here. One is our perspective on the roles and skills of the future. What are the key tech families that are typically consumed on Pluralsight, and also some insight on the full stack developer. And finally, the role families that are evolving to support these skill families, and how companies can actually approach skills development to meet these changes or to keep pace with these changes. Skills. And the amount invested is proportionally higher in for current skills as compared to the future skills. So if you see on the top right or middle and right, these are the mid to long-term bets that companies are taking. Then these are what you could consider the future skills. And if you look on the vertical axis, this is the kind of investment companies are making today in building those skills. So you will see that the high concentration of investments are today going into what is here and now or what is current. And that is understandable because these are the skills that are, or as we say, skills to pay the bills, right? These are the skills that are really bringing in current revenue. These are the skills that are keeping these companies going. But as technology is changing, the center of gravity sort of needs to shift towards new skills in terms of the investments that are being made. Now, NASSCOM has also called out the same need. So what they have basically predicted is that in the next 5 years, about 2 million tech professionals need to be reskilled. And they have outlined a few skill areas and they have outlined a few job roles. If you look at what the way NASSCOM looks at the future, they have identified about 7 or 8 skill areas like big data analytics, Internet of Things, virtual reality. And what they've done is they've also looked at the role architecture to say that it's not just sufficient for you to talk about skills, but you also have to look at the changing to encapsulate those skills. And as Arjun was mentioning, there are a lot of companies today that are looking for this persona called as, or looking to build this persona called as a full stack developer, who is somebody who's not just an expert in one area. He probably has expertise or let's say the highest level of expertise in 1 or 2 areas. He's required to have, let's say, a middle level expertise in a couple of areas and a basic expertise in a couple of areas. So which means that the person is actually multidimensional in the way she approaches a particular problem. How that translates into the technologies that are being consumed on Pluralsight. And this is a busy slide, and it is intentionally a busy slide because this is really how complex it gets. Now consider the fact that you are maybe a chief learning officer looking at this slide, or you're somebody who's a CTO who's managing the technology direction of your company, or you are someone who's managing a large technology project for a client. You will see how complex the whole technology infrastructure has become. So we see a lot of terms thrown about like big data or BI or machine learning and all that stuff. But each one of these areas breaks down into so many different dimensions and sub-dimensions. There are thousands of tools that are mushrooming, languages, processes, frameworks that are mushrooming in each of these sub-areas. So it's the challenge in companies balancing between what bets to take, first of all, on the technologies themselves, what bets to take on the subdomains within the technologies. For example, let's take big data, which is on the top left. So big data typically has 4 components. You have the distributed architecture to collect data, you have data storage, you have the compute layer, and you have visualization. The company will take a call. Maybe your strength lies in visualization in tools like Tableau, or your strength lies in the compute layer, or your strength lies in distribution, or if you want to build strengths across all those 4 dimensions, what is it that you need to do in order to grow those skills? So a lot of the consumption patterns that we're seeing on Pluralsight is sort of mirroring the broader trends that Arjun was also alluding to, in that there is clearly a set of technologies, like the large buckets of them are data, which include data science, big data, business intelligence and analytics. There is the whole artificial intelligence and machine learning spectrum. Cyber security as a hot new area. Mobility is emerging as an essential area, not because a lot of the applications today have automatically got to be mobile friendly. Internet of Things is again in the what you call as the industrial companies that are becoming the digital industrial companies. Internet of Things is becoming the mainstay in their platform architectures. And on the bottom, you find a lot of emphasis on cloud infrastructure. You find a lot of emphasis on DevOps. If you're into financial services, there's a lot of interest that is picking up in blockchain. And the whole user experience aspect that a full stack developer needs is also coming into play. And of course, project management, agile is still very, very commonly used. And a lot of software projects today are managed in an agile manner and not really in a waterfall manner. And QA and testing is a skill that even developers are supposed to know. And testers who are specialist testers are actually becoming test automation experts. Now, if you look at this picture and you wonder what is this ugly orange line that is kind of cutting across the spectrum, that is exactly what a full stack developer is. So a full stack developer is somebody who is supposed to have, let's say, if you look at the bottom row, he should know application development. He should know how that application sits and operates in a cloud infrastructure, how to make it scalable, how to make it perform. He should understand the whole DevOps process along with Agile, so that he can work in a continuous build, continuous test, continuous deploy sort of a model. He should have an understanding of UI UX, so that whatever design he builds he is keeping in mind a sort of a human factor perspective or a psychological perspective on how someone is going to interact with the application. He must also understand security, let's say from an application security point of view, how to make sure that the application that he deploys, let's say on the cloud, is protected from hacks. He must also understand if there is a data layer to his application, how that entire data layer is managed, and how that entire data layer is visualized. Now, you can have multiple combinations, or that you can have that orange line going in multiple different directions, but that is really the holy grail want to get to. They are not there today. I think today where most companies are is, if I just go to the next slide, if you look at each of these areas, there are certain roles that are emerging. Now, the immediate challenge for companies is if they segment their workforce between those that are, skilled in technologies that form the bottom left of that first graph that I showed you, and those technologies that form the top right of the graph that I showed you, you will find that 95% of today's workforce falls into the bottom left, which means they're focused on the here and the now. So the challenge for companies is, how do we retrain? How do we reskill? How do we hire the right skills? How do we hire people from the campus and get them into new technologies? How do we take people who are, let's say someone is a Java developer. How can I make him a Java developer who knows how to write Java code for a Hadoop distribution, right? Or if someone is a Python developer, how can I take that Python developer write programs using R and Python for machine learning? So that is the entire reskilling aspect that's coming into the play, where our conversations with customers are all about how do we take your existing workforce and move them in this new direction. And as Arjun was mentioning, a lot of his work with companies is how does he help companies source talent as they move in this new direction? How do they source talent internally through job roles? How do they source talent externally by vetting massive volumes of resumes in a short span of time? And working together, we help companies sort of give them a complete picture of how you can take an existing employee from point A to point B, let's say from an old technology to new technology, and let's say how you can hire someone from the market to sort of align with your technology direction. Finally, with customers, given this reality, given this complexity, is we always talk about four things when it comes to skills transformation. And as Arjun was mentioning earlier, personalization of learning is very important. So a Pluralsight is also a cloud-based learning platform, which means we take a lot of data-driven decisions. Our user experiences are very dynamic and they're driven by data. So we actually understand different learning styles of customers, and we cater to those learning styles. For example, we identify if someone is a sequential learner, we identify if someone is a repetitive learner, if someone is a bite-sized learner. It's really important for companies to understand how people learn. Secondly, it's important to accelerate learning. One of our customers told us that this in technology is leading to micro-learning. Now, I gave you the example of how if you're an expert in Java, and you need to learn how to write Java programs for a Hadoop distribution, it doesn't take too much of your time. It is just a little bit of investment that you make, and you can very quickly gain that skill. So companies today are working with Pluralsight to figure out how can they quickly take people with a base skill set and move them into the new age. So acceleration of learning is something that is extremely important. Learning. How do you take a skill that a person is learning and make sure that the person is able to assess himself? So assessments really play a huge role here. So once they consume content, how is it that they can be assessed? And how can that assessment data be plugged into taking business decisions? For example, if you are let's say, a CTO of your organization, and you, let's say, took a asked Pluralsight, I want you to assess the technology capabilities of all my tech employees on, let's say, uh, AI or machine learning. And we came back and said that, look, 70% of your workforce are novices in this area. 30% of your workforce are proficient, and 20% is proficient, and 10% is an expert. So that gives a clear idea to a CTO on where the investment needs to go, what kind of projects that he can bid on right now, and what is the amount of investment he needs to make in pulling people, more and more people, from novice to proficient, and from proficient to expert. Finally, all our research tells us that out of the two main sources of learning are on-the-job learning and online learning. So collaborative learning really plays a huge role in on-the-job learning, where you tap a senior next to you and say, please tell me how I can do this. Or even in online learning, where you can use a network of mentors, you can collaborate with experts across the world. You can collaborate with a distributed team structure and figure out how to jointly solve problems. All this is being enabled by technology. All this is being enabled by the internet. So these are the four approaches that we typically, when we talk to an L&D head, we talk to a project manager, when we talk to a CTO, we give them the perspective of the change in skills, the change in roles, and what is the approach that they can take to actually move their workforce to this role. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that it's really important for companies, and again, irrespective of whether you are in learning and development, whether you are a technology practitioner yourself, or whether you're a CTO or a business side, it's really important to understand, it's really important to understand where in the entire skills framework, where are you taking your bets, right? If you look at the slide, where are you taking your bets? Where are you putting your investment in? What are your clients wanting from you? Then figuring out what are the roles that are emerging. Then looking at your existing workforce and looking at the workforce out of your company and saying, how do I source the right amount of talent and be ready for the future, right? So I'd like to leave you with these thoughts. And again, I want to thank Arjun for the time that he spent in sharing his insights. And Megha, this is over to you, and we are happy to take questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Srini, and thank you so much, Arjun. I think it was a wonderful thought that you both put in together, and I can see that coming to the questions in the audience. So maybe now that we open up to questions, I have a few prepared, but to all of you who are viewing this session, please keep on pouring your questions in the comment section, because this is really the time to get answers to the questions from Arjun and Srini. So maybe I'll start with a question that I had when I heard both of you, and this is, Arjun, to you, taking forward from what Srini said. The thought that he left us with is to identify the skills and where the best you are taking. So, we talk a lot about the power of context and how things are very contextual to a particular organization or an industry, if I can say. So if, from an audience standpoint, if I were to ask that as leaders, how can one identify the skills or the bets one should take, considering that it is fast evolving, there are so many changes happening at such a fast pace? What are your thoughts around how can leaders identify the places where they should take bets? Has there any conversation that you've had with your with the clients, or any experiences that you would like to share with us?
Absolutely. I think that's as Srini was mentioning, it is an ever-present quandary that leaders have today in terms of workforce management groups or talent acquisition heads, to cater to the business requirements from a delivery standpoint, from a product development standpoint, right? I think the ability to understand what are base level skills that allow you to upskill, sort of make that correlation happen, build that context in say learning. I think that's going to be very important. One of the things that we are doing as a part of our run business today is identifying not just the skill maps of people from their current status, but obviously trying to correlate it to what is new and great in terms of, say, a full stack developer, a mean stack developer, somebody in the DevOps side, right? What does it mean to sort of have design thinking elements in the job description or the role description? Now, I think that factor of understanding what that means, the quotient of that skill that is required to dominate, to add value, I think is going to be very, very important. Now, the base level skills that you have, right, allow you to then say that I can perform, I can do well, be it a set of skills that have been recognized as requirement today, a set of skills that are required in 6 months' time. A base level set of skills obviously is very, very important to define. I think the journey that we are having today with organizations, and I think Pluralsight is going to be very, very with this thought, is identifying the base skill sets to be ready for whatever the future has in store, which is how we future-proof businesses. Businesses don't want, indicative access based on, the bets that one are willing to play, because the definition of the business is based on that bet, right? As it is, they're having an evolution in terms of how their business customers are relating to them on a constant basis in terms of their pricing models, performance outcomes, performance assurance models, fixed bid projects. So I think the whole manner which their customers are relating to them in also warrants that sense of, can we future proof their business? Now, future proofing is, can we build enough learning? Can we build enough analysis or gap analysis for us to connect the learning to the base level skills that have been identified, come what may? And those fundamentals allow organizations to persist, right? And if you look at good technology companies on the product side that have been around for the last 30 years, the way they hire is based on those fundamentals. Do I know enough about databases? Do I know enough about algorithms? Do I have enough, C++ knowledge, right? Do I have I come from a specific set of courses, universities, training that allows me to add the fundamental blocks? Now, that paradigm has changed dramatically, saying that relational or non-relational databases becomes really the component that you're looking at. Do I know enough about server and hosting? Do I know enough about UX and UI? Do I know enough about quality assurance and testing? Because you can't have people build web applications today without having to test their code and not understanding what the customer requires. Then can I interface my full stack developer with the customer, right? Now, that totally changes the intermediary, the model of delivery, the business outcome. And I think that fundamental quandary that businesses are in today, I think we have an opportunity to help them redefine it. We're working on it as now, and I think just looking at the base level skills is very important.
Got it. I think the last point of looking at the base level skills is basically the crux of the matter, and then working from there, right, Arjun?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So, Srini, just taking forward from what Arjun said in terms of how organizations are looking to hire fresh talent, to be able to meet the business expectations. How has your experience been in working with organizations on them developing those skills to meet those business expectations? Have you seen any change in the approach that organizations are taking? And if yes, then what's the change?
Well, there is definitely a change. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really because the stage at which the industry is in today, there is a requirement to rapidly transform one's to be ready for the changes that are happening in technology. And what is happening is that there are certain long-term bets that companies are taking. Like if you take something like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality, these are technologies that are themselves evolving, and companies, probably less than 5% of their revenue comes from these technologies today. But they know that, what they will do is they will develop a center of excellence or a center of competence, keep tracking those technologies, and start going with seeding small projects or small wins, the first wins that they can get, and develop their understanding of it. The next batch are the whole digital space. So today, the whole gamut of technologies that I shared on the slide can come under the vast umbrella of digital. For me, I mean, different companies define digital differently, but to me, it is largely digital experiences and digital infrastructure. So there is a lot of scope to repurpose existing workforce, to start bidding for digital projects, to start building digital platforms if you're a product company. So the second investment that companies are making are, can I take my existing workforce and quickly, add on a few skills to them, and start bidding for digital projects. So I would say that probably 20 to 25% of the revenue comes from these sort of skills. Then you have the sort of traditional, I mean, I don't want to use the word legacy, but traditional skills. Some of them tend to remain evergreen. So the investment on those skills is more on creating depth and making sure that the projects that are currently running, they continue running, and slowly they start creaming off the top layer of the skills from those projects, and start moving them into digital, and eventually start moving them into the future. So this is sort of a continuum when it comes to looking at existing workforce, taking a bet on future technologies, putting a small percentage of workforce there, taking larger bets on digital, repurposing existing talent there, and continuing to strengthen what is sort of paying the bills today, and taking a medium-term view of those skills and moving them into the digital bracket. So that's how companies are looking.
Very interesting, Shini, how you mentioned the strategy the organizations are taking. In your conversation, Shini, have you heard of any pertinent challenges that leaders are facing in this form of a transformation and a mass reskilling? What are those challenges that you've heard?
Sure. So the first challenge obviously is what bets to take. Now, that is dependent on how you read the market, how your clients are innovating. Many of our customers are the large tech services companies, so it all depends on the way their clients and their clients are expecting. So if you're somebody who's supporting a retail company like an Amazon, let's say, and it depends on what Amazon's customer expects from Amazon. That is the kind of innovation that you need to drive. For a lot of the other companies, it is based on the research that they do, the way they poll the market, the way they look at competition, and based on that, they form a framework in their mind that these are the bets that they want to take. And from those bets comes the other challenge of workforce at scale. So scale is something, because the timelines are short. If you miss the innovation cycle, for example, as a company, as a tech company, then you potentially miss hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of business. So whatever transformation that you need to drive needs to be driven within a short span of time, covering sometimes even hundreds and thousands of developers. So that is where online learning is sort of playing such a major role. And Pluralsight and companies like Pluralsight are actually partnering with tech companies to transform workforce at scale. So I would say that the two big challenges are what bets to place on technology and how to transform your workforce at scale.
Interesting. Just to add a question that's coming from the audience here, Srini, and this is very much related to what you said, so I'll pose it to you only. So Nivedita is asking that talent transformation happens in reality only when the learned skills are applied on real-time projects. So what are your thoughts on how platforms like Pluralsight can help in this, and how are organizations really doing it?
No, that's a very pertinent point, because the proof of the pudding is when you eat it. So a key key component of skills transformation is in the application, or first of all, the assessment of how well you're learned and the practical application of how well you're doing. So Pluralsight has a very robust assessments engine, which is built into it. We have an assessment platform called Pluralsight IQ, which is built on an AI engine called Iris. So what it does is that it doesn't waste too much time. It takes about 20 questions in 5 minutes to figure out how well a knows a particular skill. So companies use Pluralsight IQ to actually go in and assist their workforce at a very large scale in a very short span of time, so that they know where they stand currently. And then what we do is that we provide code school, which are more like application-oriented platforms, where we also have a feature called projects, where they can go and try out some of their learnings on practical problems that we provide them. And that sort of gives them a more rounded experience of learning a skill and applying the skill. And we always encourage an individual to do a pre-assessment, go through learning, do a post-assessment, and then show the improvement that he or she has seen. And that really gives a very good data point to our customers as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Vinny. So I'm a little conscious about time. So before I request both of you to summarize, I'll have one last question that I'll pick up that's coming from Prakhar, and that's to you, Arjun. So Prakhar is asking, can you share your views on how to create an agile customer success team? Does that really need only technical skills, or do we need to bet on behavioral skills as well?
That's a very good question. One of the things that I've had in experience of managing customer success teams from a technology delivery standpoint is, we as a technology company deliver platforms that help optimize workforces and acquire talent. We're helping on the workforce planning side and partnering with companies like Pluralsight to help transform talent. Customer success, identification of it requires the ability to look at the customer's journey, right? Put yourself in their shoes and understand what's priority to them, which means that you'll have to look at their analyst reports, their investor reports, and see what their definition of their 2020 plan is, what their 2025 plan is. Talk to the business heads. Now, we as a technology company, when we analyze people's profiles and historical information, performance information that is correlated on people who have done this role before and performed really well, correlated with market intelligence, you're bringing all of that great stuff from a skills and experience standpoint. What you're missing out on is the values and traits. Are you able to analyze the behavioral needs from a level of how does it connect to the culture of the organization, the culture of customer success itself? I think that part is very, very difficult to achieve today. We can all talk through it, we can speak through it, but can we deliver it dynamically and at scale? Very difficult. Can we get few attributes to define what that means in terms of the current roles that a person has performed, to sort of generally say that, yes, I believe that the person is quite fitted to deliver to the customer success and put an agile team together? To answer your question very plainly, yes, we will have a degree of accuracy, but the missing parts are the values and traits. Can that connect to the role? Can that connect to the customer? Of the customer? And can that connect to the business that requires that team to be set up? I think those pieces are still in development. I think there's a lot that deep learning can contribute. There's a lot that AI can contribute going forward. But we have to take elements of bias that will come in that might be wrong. How do you sort of identify that? And deep learning models are a black box. So can you identify why you have recognized that person? And then when you recognize 10 people in that manner, has it gone wrong? How do you validate that? So the validation models that will kick in. Is that going to be also unsupervised? So when you're trying to do something at scale, these pieces have to come into question on how you define it. So there's a lot to be done still.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for those thoughts, Arjun. And now we just have a few minutes left to do this discussion. So maybe I'll request both of you to just summarize the key takeaways for our audience from this discussion. So Arjun, now that I have you on screen, maybe why don't you go first?
Yeah. So I think the key takeaways for the audience is to look at, one is definition of skills is now very dynamic. Frameworks that define these skills have to be as dynamic, right? When you talk about an evolving world, I think one thing that has to be set as a premise is, like Srini was saying, what are the bets you're going to take? It's not a scary thought because businesses are defined by those bets. And I think the fear factor of, am I ready? Have I got the workforce in tune? Is played up more in terms of saying, am I going to succeed in my business model? I think it's more important to understand what's required and have processes and platforms and partners that can cater to that dynamic world that you have out there, right? I think the takeaway is, get ready now for that future that is really something that's clear and present. It's something that you have to address today. It's not something that you can leave off. Otherwise, you'll have Ravi Venkateshan's, um, example of the Kodak moment, right? They just waited and waited and waited, and then they were extinct. So I think people have to learn from that aspect.
Great. Thank you so much, Arjun. Srini, your takeaways for the audience.
Yeah, I think when you place your technology bets, it's always important to double click and triple click into the area of technology that you want to play on. It's not enough anymore to just talk about big data or AI. It's important to really go deep and understand, because each of these areas are so vast. Where do you want to play within those areas, if at all, or do you want to, if you want to play in the entire area, what are all the components? Then use that to sort of determine the role architecture within your organizations, work with HR, work with the CXO group, and prepare a skills roadmap. Invest in data, invest in analytics, figure out where your current workforce is, where their talent lies. Prepare a skills transformation plan that is scalable, using online learning, and find a way to keep measuring your progress. And if technology does change, and it will, without giving notice, you always have a way to sort of go back and correct a few things. So that.
Great. Thank you so much, Rini. Thank you, Arjun, for taking your time and sharing your thoughts with us on this session. I'm sure the audience enjoyed as much as I did, because for me, it was a really, really informative session. Thank you for putting this together for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. And I would like to thank Pluralsight as well for helping us put this conversation together. So thank you, Pluralsight. And to all of you for being such a wonderful audience. I can still see questions popping in, but unfortunately, due to paucity of time, we'll not be able to take. But thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Don't forget to fill in the survey, the feedback survey. The link is already shared with you. Your feedback will really help us, design these conversations in a way that's more useful to you. So please keep that coming in. And thank you, everyone, and have an inspiring day ahead.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.